The director said I'm not paid to question leadership, so I questioned nothing and watched leadership fail. I'd been working as the operations analyst at this regional banking chain for 8 years when Vaughn decided to humiliate me during the executive strategy meeting. We were discussing the new branch expansion plan, and I'd spent 3 weeks analyzing demographic data, competitor positioning, and traffic patterns for the proposed locations. The Riverside location is a mistake, I explained, pulling up my research. The area looks good on paper, but 3 major employers just announced relocations. Within 18 months, that neighborhood will lose 40% of its daytime population. Vaughn cut me off with that condescending tone executives use when they want to remind everyone about hierarchy. Let me stop you right there, Nadia. You're not paid to question leadership decisions. We've already signed the lease based on projections from consultants who actually understand market strategy. Your job is to crunch numbers we ask for, not tell us our strategy is wrong. He looked around the table to make sure his message landed. Analysis is not the same as vision, and you clearly lack the vision for this role. I closed my laptop while feeling 8 years of preventing costly mistakes get reduced to crunching numbers on command. Understood. No more questions about leadership decisions. He nodded with satisfaction. Finally, someone who understands their place. The very next week, leadership announced they were consolidating our 3 IT vendors into one cheaper provider to cut costs by 30%. I'd worked with all 3 vendors for years and knew the cheap one had terrible security protocols and couldn't handle our transaction volume. Old me would have raised red flags immediately, showed leadership the risks, pushed back hard. New me looked at the announcement email, saw it came from executive leadership, and said absolutely nothing. When the IT manager asked if I had concerns, I just shrugged, not paid to question leadership decisions. The consolidation happened in 6 weeks. Within 2 months, our systems were getting breached weekly. Transaction processing slowed to a crawl, and customer complaints tripled. We lost 4 corporate clients who specifically cited our unreliable systems. Each one represented over $2 million in annual revenue. Vaughn called an emergency meeting to discuss the IT failures, but never once connected them to the vendor decision I'd been explicitly told not to question. Month 3 brought the Riverside branch opening. Leadership threw a massive launch party with press releases and the whole performance. I showed up, smiled for photos, said nothing about the 3 major employers who'd already started relocating. By month 6, foot traffic was 60% below projections. By month 9, it was operating at a loss. The branch closed after 14 months, costing the company $4 million in lease penalties, build-out costs, and operational losses. Exactly what my analysis had predicted. Then came the merger talks with Piedmont Financial. Leadership was excited about the synergies and expanded market reach. I spent 2 weeks doing due diligence on Piedmont's financials because that was specifically requested. What I found was terrifying. Piedmont was hiding massive commercial loan defaults, had regulatory violations pending in 3 states, and their executive team was under investigation for fraud. Old me would have immediately escalated to the board, demanded we halt negotiations, shown leadership the evidence that this merger would destroy us. New me compiled everything into a neat report, submitted it to Vaughn as requested, and waited. He glanced at it during our meeting and dismissed my findings. These are just standard regulatory issues every bank deals with. You're being paranoid and looking for problems. This merger is happening, and I don't want to hear negativity about it. I didn't push back, didn't escalate, didn't question his assessment, just nodded and went back to my desk while leadership rushed toward a merger that would annihilate shareholder value. The deal closed 4 months later. Within 6 weeks, Piedmont's fraud investigation became public. Their loan defaults started cascading. Federal regulators stepped in and froze assets. Our stock price collapsed 72% in 3 days. Shareholders filed lawsuits. The board called an emergency session to figure out how this happened. Vaughn tried to blame the due diligence team, claiming nobody had identified the risks. That's when I raised my hand for the first time in months. I identified every single risk 4 months ago. I pulled up my original report with every red flag clearly documented, showed the email where I delivered it with subject line critical concerns about Piedmont merger. Then I pulled up the recording from our meeting where Vaughn had dismissed my findings as paranoia and explicitly told me he didn't want to hear negativity. The boardroom went completely silent. You knew about the fraud investigation? The board chair's voice was barely controlled fury. I documented everything and reported it to executive leadership as requested, but I was told 8 months ago that I'm not paid to question leadership decisions. So I stopped questioning and just delivered the analysis leadership asked for. Even when leadership ignored it, I showed them everything. The Riverside location analysis they'd dismissed, the IT vendor concerns they'd ignored, the Piedmont risks they'd called paranoia. 8 years of catching disasters before they happened, all documented, all ignored. The board chair looked at Vaughn with an expression that ended careers. You told her to stop identifying risks? 3 weeks later, Vaughn was gone and I was promoted to chief risk officer with a $110,000 raise, direct board reporting authority, and explicit mandate that questioning leadership decisions was now literally my entire job. I went back to doing what I'd always done, except now my job description actually matched my responsibility, and nobody could tell me that preventing catastrophic failures was overstepping my role.